Hello. Oh my god, I immediately have to clear my throat. Okay. Hopefully I don't have to keep doing that. Hello. I'm gonna do something a little different with this one. I'm not having the nice long beginning, the starting soon section. I was thinking that these streams, they're quite short, so they're probably best formatted sort of for YouTube rather than for Twitch. So I'm gonna try and sort of get into them right away. I've also put some soothing piano music on in the background. That's largely so that when I do take breaks, it's clear that the stream hasn't like gone down or anything. You can tell it's still happening. I'm just away. Chopin, please, you have to be. Let me know how the volume is with regards to the piano versus me. I want it to be audible, but not overpowering. This nocturne is really getting into it. But yeah. Gonna be reading the second chapter of Asterion. I'm gonna pull it up for myself. All right. Asterion, Book 1, Chapter 2. Deep in the library, a sparrowhawk, I can never say that word. Deep in the library, a sparrowhawk arched across the high windows, sharp eyes fixed on Finley. It glimmered gold, was likely gold all the way through, embossed on a crest that joined the general extravagance of the crown molding. Finley had spent hours staring at it from her assigned chair. She had wondered, at first, how many years of her wages would cover the cost of the sparrow hawk, only to conclude there were not enough years left in her life to work towards a single wing. It was worth more than any home she would ever own, yet it was relegated to a corner of the library where few saw it and none marveled at it. With her head clearing, everything in the upper palace seemed thus. It was all so lavish, so ornate and ostentatious, that no one piece could be properly appreciated. For almost a third of her life, Finley had called the palace home, had found comfort in the narrow, windowless corridors downstairs, with its countless crowded rooms, but she was a stranger to all that loomed above. The palace proper was too open. The windows, tall and arched with stained glass murals at their centers, left her exposed, anxious. There was too much light. The vaulted ceilings were too high, and she did not even know her way back to the infirmary. Her present company did not help. Princess Alexandria had made good on her word, and had Finley join her in the library for the past 2 days. Finley sat rigid, doing her utmost not to breathe too loudly, but it had not been enough for the princess. She had pointed Finley into a chair with a high back, facing away from her, where Finley was hidden from sight. She suggested Finley sleep off her injuries, and Finley, stubborn, had managed to stay awake for a full 30 minutes. She returned to the infirmary each night, where the healers examined her and shone more lights in her eyes. She dreaded the thought of returning downstairs, and not only because of the obstacle of stairs. Downstairs thrummed with the rumor that she was dead, for surely a princess had no need of a gardener to protect her, and Finley was in no state to answer 100 questions she couldn't have dreamt up. The library doors clicked softly open. Finley glanced around her chair, vaguely aware she'd drifted most of the way to sleep, and smiled at Ida, lunch tray in her arms. "Is it that time already?" Princess Alexandria asked. The scratch of her pen fell silent for the first time in hours. Ida placed the tray on the edge of her desk, humming in the affirmative. The princess had conducted all her business from the library those last few days. She handled all her correspondence, much of it for sign, and held meetings with people from all corners of the court. Nobles showed up unannounced, eager for the princess to know how truly glad they were to see her safe. Princess Alexandria sighed each time and told them that despite its best efforts, the crystal had not been able to forestall this particular meeting. Plenty of the nobles willfully misinterpreted her, thinking themselves part of the princess's inner circle. "Anything else, Your Majesty?" Ida asked. Princess Alexandria hummed, glanced over the dishes, and waved a hand. "Nothing. As ever, there is enough here for an army." Ida bowed and carried over a portion for Finley. Finley relished in the chance to smile at someone, to be looked at and seen, but could only spare Ida a quick squeeze of the hand. Ida winked, excusing herself from the library. Finley settled back into the terse silence and carefully broke her lunch down into smaller portions, partly because eating was exhausting, temples aching when she chewed, and partly to have something to do for the afternoon. As she was about to pop the first apple slice into her mouth, Alexandria startled her, suddenly saying, "Finley?" A single word, and already there was an accusation in it. "Yes, Princess?" Finley asked. "Why is the palace's head cook bringing lunch to us? Surely that is far below her talents, and rather more the responsibility of footmen and their ilk." "Oh, Ida's my best friend. She's probably doing it to keep an eye on me," Finley said, thinking it safe to take a bite. The princess did not answer, not until after a great deal of chewing her way through silent contemplation. "Do adults have best friends?" she asked. Finley, mouth full of fresh bread slathered in butter, could not chew fast enough to answer. "Take a turn around the library once you've eaten that," Princess Alexandria said, already back to writing. "Show a little initiative in your work, won't you? Who knows how many temperamental crystals are hiding amongst all those books? Take advantage of this opportunity. There are those who would sell an arm to get a glimpse at some of the volumes we have stored here." Finley did not know how to answer. She had spoken up once to ask the princess what the princess was working on, and had summarily been informed that she was there to thwart any malfunctioning magic, not for conversation. She said nothing as respectfully as she could, and finished up the cold meat and breadcrumbs on her plate. "Unless you can't read, I suppose," Princess Alexandria said, almost to herself. Placing her plate on the side table, Finley pulled herself to her feet. Her ribs throbbed, but the pain was grounding. The slight strain in her leg and back muscles had grown preferable to sitting idle in the finest armchair she'd ever seen. Without looking back at Princess Alexandria, she moved out of the sparrowhawk's gaze and between shelves of books. From her seat, she'd counted 817 books against a single wall, but there were at least 10 times as many in the entire room. Titles shimmered in silver across spines, and paintings lined the walls between bookcases. They were portraits, all of them, and Finley did not recognize any of the subjects at first. They were not members of the royal family, judging by the plaques at the bottom of the frames, nor were they nobility. It was not until Finley moved forward in time. She didn't move forward in time, that would be wild. It was not until Finley moved forward in time to the last handful of decades. She did move forward in time, I am the fool. She moved forward in time to the last handful of decades that the names meant anything to her. The most recent painting, no more than 5 years old, was of the princess's knight, Sir Kiln. She wore polished armor, sparrowhawk gold across her breastplate, helmet under one arm. There were no trophies to gather from her prey. She stared ahead, not at the painter, nor the viewer, but as though something lurked in the shadows behind them. Finley stepped back. The pain in her side flared, leaving her limbs cold. These portraits, 36 in all, celebrated the heroes who had claimed victory against the labyrinthine beast beneath the palace. Next to Sir Kiln's portrait was a plaque inscribed with 100 or more names, memorializing those who had lost their lives to the beast. Finley stepped back, eyes sliding off the plaque, and felt she ought to bow to the painting. Instead, she turned and grabbed the first book she saw. It was a text on the city's sewage system. The diagrams, if nothing else, were illuminating. There were the servants below the palace, the labyrinth beneath that, and Finley had forgotten the mundane depths of pipes and narrow tunnels, most kept running by magic. Finley. The open book slipped from Finley's lap as she started awake. The princess grabbed it before it hit the floor, then carefully dropped it carelessly next to Finley's lunch. "What is it?" Finley mumbled, shuffling to sit up. "Did something happen?" Princess Alexandria arched her brow. The high windows were not shattered, the sparrowhawk had not fallen, and neither smoke nor magic lingered in the air. "I have avoided it thus far, but I've business to attend to beyond this stifling room," she said. "Do I need to wheel you around?" Finley had not used her wheelchair in a full day, though it had been left by the library doors at Okari's insistence. "I can walk. I want to walk. Where are we going?" Finley said. She got to her feet, bolstered by lunch and her nap, and proved surprisingly steady. Finley was the only one impressed by the feat. Princess Alexandria marched away, preparing herself for what laid beyond the relative security of those ornate doors. No sooner were they out of the library than they were accosted. A woman fell into step with Finley, armor jostling. Finley glanced over at a face she had so recently seen, only it was not rendered in thick, cresting swirls of oil paint. Even without the pain in her side, Finley's step would have faltered. Sir Kiln nodded sharply. Not a greeting, but a sign of camaraderie. Princess Alexandria stopped dead. Sir Kiln mirrored her perfectly, but Finley almost stumbled into the princess. "What is it?" Princess Alexandria asked. Her voice was sharp. She had spoken gently to Finley after all. "I am to accompany you, Princess," Sir Kiln said. Her voice was soft, deep yet light. She bowed at the princess's back, hand splayed over the armor shielding her heart. "When I have need of you, Kiln, I will call for you. As it is, I am only wandering the corridors of my palace, not sneaking into enemy territory." "Be that as it may, Princess, the Queen has asked that I—" "If Queen Briar is so very eager to put you to work, then go guard her. Relive your glory days. Stop following me," the princess said. "And that is an order, not a request." Sir Kiln bowed again. Princess Alexandria saw none of it. The princess continued through the hallways, shoulders hunched as she strained to catch a clatter of metal. Finley hurried after her, fearful, for a moment, that the order spread to her, too. She looked back before rounding a corner, caught Sir Kiln's eye, and shot what she hoped was a sympathetic glance. The palace proper was dizzying. Finley had always pictured the upstairs as an inversion of the downstairs, only better decorated and awash in natural light, but could not have deceived herself further. Below the palace, all was stone, grey and bare, and she had not the vocabulary to name the opulent, mesmerizing materials that left her terrified to unpin her arms from her sides. The crystals in the basement, the finest most would ever lay eyes on, were nothing compared to those that adorned the palace. They were clear as water, each faceted surface perfectly smooth. The power within them shone like stars trapped in glass and time, and the ironwork of the sconces was crafted around each individual crystal. Still, their power vanished into itself as Finley passed. We are going to visit Prince Aiden, Princess Alexandria said, speaking over Finley. The man has had enough time to rest, and I cannot put off the inevitable much longer. Finley's feet slowed. A light flickered out, letting winter shadows fill the corridor. Taking a quick break. The last time she'd seen the prince, he'd been crumpled on the floor, night bowed over him. Finley had not known whether he was alive and nurtured little hope, and it had all happened so quickly after that. The thin, coppery taste of blood in her mouth, the silence of the unsettled world, and the song that held no tune, resonating from the remaining crystal. She'd leapt at it as though she hadn't seen what it had done to the prince, as though there was some guarantee of surviving her foolish, instinctive bravery, and her whole life had changed. Not for the better and not for the worse, just changed. Beautiful boots made of a soft brown leather never meant to meet mud or grit, pressed to the forest green carpets of the palace she had always lived beneath, unseen, unnoticed. The uniform tailored to her, the black breeches and green tunic, was of a fabric so fine it seemed impossible to crease them, and all her discomfort at being clad thus was parried by a soft, enveloping warmth. Princess Alexandria stopped at an infirmary door. Not the infirmary Finley and the other injured had been taken to, but a private chamber at the heart of the palace. Sir Mazur stood outside, leant against the wall, not a cut or bruise visible on their tattooed face. They pushed theirself into a standing position, boot against wallpaper, and tilted their head more than they bowed. Their mismatched eyes flickered to Finley, before meeting the princess's. "Sir Mazur, a pleasure, I'm sure," Princess Alexandria said. "Would you be good enough to request an audience with His Highness? I am eager to see whether he has moved into the desiring revenge stage of his recovery." Okari did not have quiet days. They did not go more than 4 hours without some new disaster to wrangle, but the last week had truly tested their limits. Arranging the palace for a royal visit had been the culmination of more than 30 years' experience, and it had ended in something worse than bloodshed. The hours, days, weeks they had poured into instructing their staff on Sinite etiquette, the importance of being on good terms with the foreign servants and guards without spilling state secrets, and the lessons in basic Sinite were for nothing. It had all gone up in smoke, shattered crystals, and hysteria. Being interrogated by the Queen's advisors and interrogating their own people was not the worst of it. Every half hour, as if on schedule, someone pounded on their door, certain the crystals in the kitchen were glowing too brightly, or that the light crystals in their bedrooms were starting to show signs of cracking. Requesting a half-dozen witches from the palace to inspect the crystals ahead of their quarterly checkup had done nothing to help. Any crystal could shatter and explode at any moment, and no fewer than 12 plates, 2 glasses, 3 mugs, and a vase gifted by the Aterian ambassador had been broken by people jumping at their own shadows. Akari sat in their office, as close to slumping in their seat as they had ever come. They had spent most of their life in that room, keeping meticulous records of every individual employed by the palace, playing the part of leader, diplomat, arbiter of justice, and, occasionally, shoulder to cry on. The shelves upon shelves of ledgers, all written in their hand, and the countless gifts from pleased nobles, grateful servants, and condescending royals were of no comfort after nigh on 34 hours without sleep. Luna sat opposite Akari, a light in and of herself. No matter how long she had served the palace, there was no reason why she wouldn't be the prime suspect. The illusionary display had been her suggestion, and the crystals were imbued with her power. Once she had been begrudgingly cleared by the Queen, Luna had immediately been ordered to begin her own investigation, and was surviving on as little sleep as Akari. "I've checked and double-checked everything the other witches looked over," Luna said, gesturing to a pile of crystals arranged on the desk before her. "There's nothing dangerous. A little worn, maybe. This one was imbued before my time, but not about to explode. I'll refresh these crystals, put them back, and let everyone know it's safe. Not that they're any more likely to take my word than the last half-dozen witches." Akari turned one of the fist-sized crystals in their hands. Luna had drawn the power from it, weight lost along with the magic, and it did not rest in their hand like a stone. It was eerily light, dull and clouded, and the surface did not feel so smooth as the facets always looked with magic pouring from them. "Can you tell them that you've put a special anti-explosion enchantment on them too?" Akari asked. Luna laughed, holding out a hand for the crystal they were toying with. "I can, and I'll do you one better," Luna said, holding up the empty crystal. "I'll actually do it." There was no strain in Luna's magic. She did not have to search within herself for a place of power, a spring of strength. She held the crystal in cupped hands, white eyes gleaming, and poured magic into the dull rock as easily as breathing. The crystal glowed with magic, but did not blare with light. Luna placed it on the desk with a thud. Heat emanated from it. Akari found a smile, never not impressed by Luna's work, and held their hands over the pleasant, rising warmth. "Just between me and you, as old friends like, what are your thoughts on this?" Akari asked. God, they had to be exhausted if they were giving in to the temptation of gossip, surrendering to not quite baseless speculation. Luna grinned. She rarely didn't have a smile for every situation, always sincere, never inappropriate, and it had been true of all the years Akari had known her. Even now, sat across from the royal witch, that year turned 32, Akari found it difficult to believe she was no longer a child. Luna's power and renown caught them off guard every time. Akari had known Princess Alexandria as a child, too, but that change was not so difficult to internalize. Somehow, childhood had never suited Princess Alexandria. "Well, since it's just the two of us, I'll let you in on a secret. I have absolutely no idea. It doesn't make sense. There are no signs of sabotage, and I know the magic in those crystals was my own. It's all over the fragments we managed to salvage. Crystals don't just explode, and when they do, it takes a lot of power and skill to make that happen. Oh, elemental magic is easy enough. Any witch with a shard of crystal can start a fire or freeze water, but explosions? Crystals don't want to explode. It's not in their nature. They want to stay together, want to hold that magic in close, Luna said, waving her hands about. Akari leant back in their chair, warm hands knitted over their stomach. So there's no signs of tampering, no reason for it to have happened. But it just did? They asked. Yes, and if I don't figure something out quickly, the Queen's going to listen to Princess Alexandria and have me hanged, drawn, and quartered in the center of Sunspire, Luna said. Akari chuckled. Now, you know our princess better than that, they said. What I'm worried about is what this means for Thisia. Crystals are our main source of everything, and the staff are already bad enough. What if our neighbors start voicing concerns that their own crystals are gonna explode, or questioning whether we really do have the best ones on the continent, Luna held out her arms in a wide, shallow shrug. A lot more work for the both of us, probably. How is the princess, anyway? I haven't had time to see her since the whole incident, by which I mean I've been pretending not to notice that I've been intentionally kept away from her. Oh, you know, the usual. She doesn't change no matter what happens. Busy torturing her new foil, I expect. Humming, Luna got to her feet, multitude of crystals cradled in her arms. I'll have to pay Finley a visit. I doubt she's got a proper thank you yet, and she's done more for us, for Thisia and Sign, than she knows, she said. And this is how we reward her. Luna sighed, exaggerated, sympathetic, and brushed off Akari's gratitude for taking so much time out of her day to humor the servants. Akari rose to open the door, and Luna ducked down, kissing their cheek before leaving in a cheerful blaze of white light. Once she had pushed herself on tiptoes to kiss their cheek. Once she'd been a child, a witch with no formal training, but that hadn't stopped the old king from staking his claim on her. The private infirmary was as lavish as all the palace. Prince Aiden sat propped up in a bed easily big enough for 3 people, draped in silks. A crowd gathered around him, Syenite dignitaries that had traveled with him and a number of healers, one his own, and Finley feared the constant barrage of well-meaning, overprotective company was more exhausting than the wounds he still carried. Neither scars nor bruises marred his face. The prince smiled through the pain magic did not numb him to entirely. A large crystal sat along the headboard, bathing him in its healing glow, but the prince's recovery was to be a long, daunting process. Finley saw it in his sunken eyes, in his gray, ashen skin. His fingertips were all he dared move. Crystals could heal any wound in an instant. They could pull shattered bones back together, reunite severed veins, and reconstruct shredded muscle. But the price for such a miracle could rarely be paid. It was painful beyond comprehension, beyond what nerves were made for. The agony worse than the initial wound, and exacerbated by the body's betrayal, in doing it to itself. The after effects were pure agony. The memory could scarcely be lingered on without reigniting the pain all over again, and it took years, decades, for the nightmares to cease. Many of those healed in such a way sought the death they had been saved from, and Finley had read more than one book in which lightning-fast healing was used to torture innocents by the most depraved villains. Healing magic had to be tempered. Its potency had to be diluted by time and supplemented by rest. "Good afternoon, Your Highness," Princess Alexandria said. "I apologize for the time it has taken to seek you out. but I rather thought you'd appreciate your privacy. As much privacy as a prince can ever truly obtain in a foreign palace, that is." A few of the gathered dignitaries flattered themselves into being offended. "Not at all, Princess. Thank you for taking the time to personally visit," Prince Aiden said. His voice was but a rasp. "I'm glad to see that you were not badly injured yourself." "Indeed. Now tell me, do I take pity on your weakened state and keep this conversation to mere pleasantries, no doubt boring us both? Or do I take advantage of the situation and press you to tell me why Sign has decided, near on demanded, to visit us?" Finley stood straighter, guilty of pestering the injured prince by association. Sir Mazur, perched on a cabinet, found nothing of interest in the princess's words. It had not occurred to Finley that she would be privy to secrets and declarations of the sort. All she had heard during her tenure in the library had been little more than generic well-wishes and leading questions, and she had not yet truly absorbed what being in the presence of royalty meant. "Princess, I'm sure I cannot stop you, no matter what path you choose," Prince Aiden said, attempting a laugh and spluttering through a cough. Someone rushed over, readjusting the pillows behind him, and another attendant materialized a glass of water. "But surely you wouldn't rob an injured man of the opportunity to make his announcement in his own time, in the fashion it deserves." Princess Alexandria tilted her head to the side. The prince's words had not swayed her, but she was willing to humor him. "And surely you would not—" The princess paused. Finley followed her narrowed gaze to the crystal over the prince's head, thrumming with relief from pain and slow, near-natural healing, and saw the light flicker and grow dim. "Finley, out," Princess Alexandria said, pointing to the door without looking back at her. "You're weakening the crystal, and the prince is too polite to wince." Finley couldn't argue, not with so many eyes on her, and not with the cold, commanding tone the princess effortlessly mastered. She bowed at Princess Alexandria's back with less grace and confidence than Sir Kiln, and showed herself out of the room. Sir Mazur slipped out after her, letting the door swing shut. "If she'd told me what we were doing, I wouldn't have gone in there with her. I know better than that," Finley muttered. "But I'm glad I get to talk to you, Sir Mazur. I wanted to thank you for what you did, jumping in with the shield like that. I'd still be in the infirmary if not for you." Sir Mazur hopped onto a nearby windowsill, not troubled by what their armor would do to the woodwork. "Rydal," they said. "Rydal," Finley corrected herself. She hadn't wanted to be overly familiar, to ignore rank, but Rydal had too much of a closed-off, easy way about them to hold out for long. "Thank you, really." "Sure." "Were you badly injured?" "The witch fixed me up." "Luna?" "Probably." Finley searched for something more to say. No doubt a knight had adventures of the sort so often that it hardly occurred to them to care about anything so banal as flying chunks of crystal. "So, you're the princess's new pet," Rydal said, filling the silence. "What? No, she just needs a foil for a few days, and I've worked here for 12 years, which apparently makes me trustworthy, and—" "A few days. That's how it starts," Rydal said. "I don't get it." "Get what?" Rydal pointed at the closed door. Small, silvery salamanders were stitched into the fingers of their gloves. They were not dressed as cautiously as they had been on the palace grounds, for most of their armor was the leather sort, with a cursory chain vest thrown on for the sake of appearances. "I don't know what they're talking about either," Finley said. "Not that. The princess. The dead king was her dad, but the new queen is her cousin." "Why?" Rydell's accent was musical, vowels stressed in unusual places, but it was evident that they carefully chose to mark Thisia's former king as dead, not merely late or old. "It's confusing, isn't it?" Finley said, delighted to have something to share with them. "Princess Alexandria's mother died when she was young, and King Nicholas raised her with the help of his brother, Prince Edmund, and his sister-in-law. After the Prince Edmund died, the king married his brother's widow, Lady Delphine, and adopted her daughter. That was, 20 years ago? Long before I started working here. Princess Alexandria was next in line for the throne, but King Nicholas changed his will at the last minute. Technically, Queen Briar was the firstborn." Rydell spared a moment to map the family tree in their mind. "That's messed up," they said. "It gets worse. The king and his brother were identical twins. No wonder the princess and queen look so similar. Messed up," Rydell muttered. This was no royal secret Finley was buying a slither of the Cyanide Knight's attention with. It was common knowledge, documented by historians, and an endless source of discussion and debate downstairs. Some of the servants were convinced Prince Edmund's death had been suspicious, that the king had wanted his brother out of the way, but Finley was of the opinion that it was an unfortunate fact of life, unexpected as it was, and the ensuing abrupt marriage had been accepted purely because no one would dare speak out against the royal family. And they say that it was not the misplaced familiarity of the wordless song that caused Finley to trail off, clearer than anything heard through a wall had a right to be. It was that Rydell looked over, brow furrowed in concentration, as though following the tune. They glanced at one another. Finley rushed to the door, Rydell at her side, but faltered once the handle was in her grasp. The princess would not be pleased by the interruption, and Finley did not wish to silence whatever secrets the prince was primed to spill. Shouldering her aside, Rydell shoved the door open. The two of them tumbled in, following the thread of music, towards the crystal over the bed. All eyes turned to them. "Yes?" Princess Alexandria asked archly, speaking with as much authority to Rydell as to her own foil. "The crystal, it's—" Finley waved her hands in the air, her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. The last time she'd heard that strange, elongated note, she'd jumped on a crystal that could have killed her. But it hadn't. It hadn't killed anyone, and there was no excuse for the paralysis that overcame her. Someone shouldered their way between Finley and Rydell. Princess Alexandria's expression shifted from dry irritation to a flash of unnamed anger, and Prince Aiden's guards and healers moved closer to him. Sir Kiln darted across the room and snatched the crystal from its bracket. Light bled between her fingers as the crystal began to whine. She threw it across the room, straight at Finley, but it hit her chest and bounced off her grasping hands. It would have ended up on the floor, free to roll under the prince's bed, had Rydell not snatched it out of the air and pressed it into her palms. The light fizzled out. All magic fled, leaving Finley to cradle a dull, grey rock, frosted from within, weighing close to nothing. Princess Alexandria stared between Finley, Sir Kiln, and the crystal. In profile, her aquiline nose was as sharp as the sparrowhawk's beak, her eyes just as piercing. "Well," Princess Alexandria said, "perhaps my cousin was right about my needing a foil to babysit me." And that's chapter 2. I hope you all enjoyed. It was a pretty short one today. That's about what I can manage. If you liked it, feel free to go check out Sam's Substack, samfarron.substack.com. You can also, I'll pop the link over in chat. It's on the screen. I forgot it's on the screen already. And you can see more about Sam's books here. I have got to go, but I hope we liked the chapter today. I liked that one. It's very exciting at the end, isn't it? With everyone rushing into the room. Well, I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and hopefully next week I'll be back for chapter 3. Until then, bye-bye!